Hey there, ready to dive into a world where history bumps shoulders with myth?
It's a fascinating way to look at how stories evolve, how cultures grapple with the idea of exceptional individuals, and where the lines between human potential and the truly fantastical begin to blur.
Exactly. We've got figures like Achilles and King Arthur, names everyone knows. But this deep dive takes us beyond the surface level.
It's best to start with what's familiar. The C tier, for example, is all about those figures who likely have roots in real history, but whose legends have been embellished over time.
Okay, so these are the heroes whose stories might have a grain of truth, but got a serious upgrade over the centuries.
Precisely. Take Achilles, a warrior dipping his heel in the river Styx for near invincibility. That's a story designed to capture the imagination.
So, human achievement, but with the volume turned way up for storytelling's sake.
Exactly. It reflects how we elevate individuals to heroic status, imbuing them with qualities that go beyond ordinary limits.
Which makes me think about Robin Hood. No magical arrows, but robbing from the rich and giving to the poor. That story has resonated for centuries.
And it's fascinating to consider how those stories, even without concrete historical backing, often reflect real social tensions. Robin Hood becomes an outlet for anxieties about unfairness and a longing for someone to fight for the common good.
A fictional champion born from real-world worries.
Precisely. And then, on the flip side of that, we have someone like Joan of Arc, a woman leading armies and claiming divine inspiration in the midst of the 100 Years' War.
She's proof that sometimes reality itself is extraordinary enough to inspire legends.
Indeed. And as we move from confirmed historical figures into the murkier territory of myth and history combined, we enter the B tier. This is where figures like King Arthur reside.
The legendary king with his knights, quests for the Holy Grail. Most of that is likely later additions, right?
Precisely. A King Arthur, or someone very like him, probably existed in early medieval Britain, but the magical elements. That's where we see the human need for narratives that go beyond the everyday. These stories become about something larger, tapping into our desire for meaning and purpose.
It's almost like we're hardwired to crave those grand narratives.
It's a compelling thought, isn't it? And as we move deeper into this tier, we find even more compelling figures. Consider Beowulf, facing down monsters pulled straight from nightmares.
Now we're talking dragons, creatures that make you glad you're listening from the safety of, well, wherever you are right now. But even with fantastical beasts, there's something very human about Beowulf's story.
Absolutely. It's a tale about courage, mortality, and confronting forces that seem overwhelming, themes that resonate across cultures and time periods.
Yeah.
These stories act as a sort of shared language for confronting the unknown.
And then you have Gilgamesh, a king so driven he sets out on a quest for immortality. Talk about ambitious goals.
Gilgamesh embodies that very human desire to transcend our limits. While he might be a blend of historical figure and myth, his story taps into something fundamental about our anxieties regarding life, death, and what might lie beyond.
The yearning for something more than our allotted years on Earth. It's a theme that pops up again and again throughout history, doesn't it? But before we get too lost in existential pondering, we've got one more stop in this B tier: Spartacus. This isn't just a guy fighting lions in an arena. This is a man leading a slave rebellion against the might of Rome.
Spartacus's rebellion is already a powerful historical event. But the way his story has been told and retold, often with exaggerations and added layers of drama, speaks to our fascination with those who challenge power structures, who fight for freedom against impossible odds.
He embodies that spirit of defiance, of pushing back against oppression.
And it's no coincidence that such figures often become larger than life in our collective memory. They represent hope, agency, and the belief that even the seemingly powerless can rise up and fight for change.
So from Beowulf's monsters to Gilgamesh's impossible quest and Spartacus's rebellion, the B tier shows us how history and mythology intertwine to explore these larger-than-life themes.
Precisely. It's a reminder that even when a story veers into the fantastic, it's often rooted in very real human concerns, fears, and aspirations. And as we move from those figures whose stories blur the lines between history and myth, we find ourselves in the A tier, a realm where myth reigns supreme. But what's fascinating is how even these fully mythological figures still resonate with us because of their very human struggles.
It's like we can relate to a hero facing down a hydra, not because we've ever seen a multi-headed serpent, but because that hero is also wrestling with grief, love, ambition, those universal human experiences.
Precisely, take Hercules, for example. He's often depicted as this pinnacle of strength, someone who literally conquers death itself during his descent into the underworld. But his story is also one of immense loss, impulsive rage, and a constant need to prove himself.
He's a bit of a cautionary tale too, isn't he? Like, even with godlike strength, you can still make choices that lead to immense suffering, both for yourself and others.
It's a reminder that true heroism isn't about being flawless, but about how you navigate those flaws, how you overcome challenges even when they're self-inflicted.
It makes me think about Odysseus' 10 years trying to get home. That's dedication, but also talk about a journey riddled with setbacks. He's facing shipwrecks, monsters, even the wrath of a god who really doesn't want him to reach his destination.
And yet, through it all, Odysseus embodies resilience. He uses his cunning, his ability to adapt and strategize to overcome those obstacles. It's a testament to human ingenuity, even in a world where gods and monsters seem to hold all the cards.
He's a reminder that sometimes brains are just as powerful as brawn. And speaking of overcoming incredible odds, we have Perseus. I mean, who stares down Medusa and lives to tell the tale?
And it's not just the act of slaying a Gorgon that makes Perseus compelling. It's the motivation behind it. He's driven by a sense of duty, a need to fulfill a prophecy, but also by a love for his mother, a desire to protect her from a terrible fate.
So even when facing creatures pulled straight from nightmares, it's those human connections, those deeply relatable emotions that make his story resonate.
Precisely. It shows us that even in the realm of myth, where gods and monsters roam freely, it's the human heart of the story, those universal desires and anxieties that truly capture our imaginations.
It's a good reminder that even in stories about larger-than-life figures, the themes often come back down to those very human experiences. But I have a feeling we're about to enter a realm where the lines between human and something else get even blurrier, the S tier, and beyond this is where things get really interesting, right?
It's true with the S tier, we're pushing past those familiar mythological narratives and into a realm where power operates on a scale that's hard to even fathom. These figures don't just bend the rules, they often embody forces that make the rules themselves seem irrelevant.
Okay, yes, embody forces is a whole other level. Where do we even begin to unpack that?
Well, a good example is Thor. We've all heard of him as a god of thunder, wielding a hammer with unimaginable power. But what's interesting is how he straddles that line between raw force and a sense of guardianship. He's protector, a defender of cosmic order.
So yeah, he could level mountains, but he's doing it for the good guys.
Precisely. It speaks to how these stories grapple with the idea of immense power and the responsibility that comes with it. And then we have Achilles, but not the version we met earlier. This is Achilles in his prime, practically invincible thanks to his dip in the river Styx. He represents the absolute peak of what humans might achieve, but with an almost divine enhancement.
It makes you wonder about the fine line between a hero inspiring awe and one that inspires, well, a healthy dose of fear too.
Indeed. And to round out our S tier, we have Theseus. He's known for his cunning in navigating the labyrinth and defeating the Minotaur. It's a reminder that even when facing monstrous threats, human intellect, the ability to strategize and outsmart, can be its own form of heroism.
So even in a world with gods and near-invincible warriors, there's still room for the clever underdog to come out on top. But now we're venturing into what this tier list calls S+ and beyond. I'm almost afraid to ask, but what kind of reality-bending power are we talking about now?
This is where things get particularly interesting. We're talking about figures like Karna from the Mahabharata. He's a hero born with divine blessings, including armor, that makes him almost impossible to defeat, and yet his life is marked by tragedy, by a sense of inescapable fate.
So even with all that power, he's not exempt from the complexities of life, of destiny playing its hand.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even extraordinary individuals exist within a larger framework, a cosmic order, that even they can't fully escape.
Which makes me think of Sun Wukong, the Monkey King. This is a figure who defies heaven itself, who rebels against the established order. He's all about transformation, trickery, and a refusal to be bound by any limitations, even those imposed by the gods.
Sun Wukong embodies that very human desire for autonomy, for challenging those in power. He represents the spark of rebellion, the refusal to accept an unjust fate. And then we have Hercules once more, but this time he's ascended to godhood, achieving a level of existence that goes beyond his earlier struggles.
Talk about a glow-up. He goes from battling monsters to being one of the guys calling the shots on Mount Olympus.
It speaks to the idea of transcendence, of achieving a state of being that surpasses human limitations. But as we move further into this beyond broken tier, we encounter figures who make even Hercules' godhood seem almost ordinary. We're entering the realm where heroes embody cosmic forces, defy the very concepts of life and death.
Okay, now we're in territory where I'm not sure hero is even the right word anymore. These sound more like forces of nature given humanish form.
That's a very apt way to put it. Take Krishna, for example. He's not simply a hero in the traditional sense, but an avatar of the god Vishnu. His story is about divine wisdom, cosmic cycles of creation and destruction, a perspective that makes our earthly concerns seem incredibly small.
It's a whole other way of looking at existence, one where the rules we think are set in stone are more like suggestions.
And then we have Moses, a figure who stands at the crossroads of history. And he parts the Red Sea, receives commandments from God, leads his people to freedom. It's a story that has shaped religious and cultural understanding for millennia.
Talk about a legacy to have that kind of impact. You'd have to be operating on a whole other level of influence, but where do you even go from there? Who else could possibly fit into this category?
Well, our next figure embodies the archetype of the wise sorcerer. But on a cosmic scale, we're talking about Merlin. He's not just someone who casts spells. He understands the fabric of existence, manipulates time, and sees into the heart of destiny. Okay, understands the fabric of existence is a pretty good indicator that we're dealing with someone who's broken free of any standard definition of power. But we're not done yet, are we? There's one more figure in this final tier 1 who seems a bit different from the rest. Yes, our final entry takes us into the realm of cosmic horror. We're talking about Cthulhu.
Cthulhu, the tentacled entity from H.P. Lovecraft's stories that doesn't exactly scream hero to me.
That's precisely what makes him such a fascinating inclusion. Cthulhu embodies a vast unknowable power that's indifferent to human concerns, a force of nature that exists beyond our comprehension. He represents the ultimate unknown, a reminder that some things defy categorization and understanding.
So he's not someone you'd want to grab a beer with, but he forces us to confront the limits of our own perception, which, when you think about it, is a pretty fitting end to this journey. Through tiers of heroes, we've gone from those grounded in history to figures who warp reality itself.
It's been a fascinating exploration of how humanity grapples with the idea of exceptional individuals, how stories evolve, and where those stories intersect with our deepest fears and aspirations.
And that's what makes this whole deep dive so captivating. It's not just about ranking heroes, it's about understanding what those heroes tell us about ourselves, our cultures, and our place in a universe we're still trying to comprehend. So as we wrap things up here, I want to leave you with this thought. The next time you encounter a story that pushes the boundaries of what you think is possible, don't shy away from it. Lean into that sense of wonder and see where it takes you. You might be surprised by what you discover about yourself and the world around you. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and as always, keep diving deep.